keeping public health a priority with the release of asylum seekers into communities.
There are a lot of fear-based messages that aren't based on facts. It's not based on the evidence that we collect in public health.
The challenges facing farmers in Arizona as the need to conserve water intensifies.
Under the critical water shortage, they're the first to lose.
Plus, two teens explore issues impacting Arizona and invite listeners to tune in.
If listeners just are informed about what's happening, hopefully they can make a difference.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. The southern border is once again front and center on the national stage, with visits from President Trump and Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen this week. The president's push for increased security included threats to close the border, which would significantly disrupt trade and travel at ports of entries. It comes as Customs and Border Protection says facilities used to process immigrants are at capacity because of the ongoing surge in families from Central America. Last week, a statement from the Border Patrol Yuma sector said it began releasing detainees on their own recognizance with a notice to show up in immigration court. And this week, the Tucson sector said it's doing the same, continuing to coordinate with local non-governmental organizations to, quote, minimize the impact of these releases on the community. The Border Patrol calls these releases unprecedented. We wondered what considerations, if any, public health experts should take into account as large groups of immigrants enter communities. We explored the issue with Katie Tucker, a research specialist with the Arizona Prevention Research Center at the University of Arizona Mel and Enid Zuckerman College of Public Health. Mass migration of people, in this case 22,000 traveling through Arizona from December until now. Any risk presented to Arizona when you have such a large group of people passing through?
The health issues that we see from migrants who are crossing and who may come into our humanitarian shelters include things like dehydration, blisters, burns, scrapes, anything that you would expect from someone who just crossed the desert. We do also see things like chronic disease and respiratory symptoms and stuff like that, but they're not things that will cause harm to others. What we see is that the countries of origin of many of these migrants have higher vaccination rates than even we have in some states in the U.S. So in Guatemala, for example, many of the migrants come from Guatemala. Their vaccination rates range from 93% to 98%. In Arizona, we're 93.4% for school-aged children. So in terms of risk they pose to others, it's just non-existent. That's not really an issue that we see.
So many of these people, though, they may be coming from third world nations that are not quite as developed as the United States may be. They are receiving vaccines.
Yes.
Okay. And thus they're not necessarily presenting a public health crisis to our communities.
When we talk about public health, we talk about issues and diseases that can be prevented and conditions that foster health. And so, yes, the conditions that they may present with at the border have roots in where they came from, so in poverty and deprivation and violence, and they're exacerbated by their journey. But our public health systems in the U.S. are very well equipped to track and deal with communicable diseases or other diseases that we may not be as accustomed to seeing here. And these populations have the same vaccines that we have. So in terms of public health risks, it's just there's no evidence that migrating populations import communicable diseases. We've seen that in Europe. The World Health Organization reports that migrating populations do not import. There's no evidence to show that they import diseases into their country of destination. What we see is that diseases that we may not normally see in the U.S. are imported by travelers, tourists, maybe healthcare providers who go back and forth a lot more. But we have no evidence to show that migrating populations are causing any health outbreaks or any health issues in their country of destination.
What's the time frame? Because I can imagine some people who will be watching this and say, well, how can we tell if this is an unprecedented situation we've never experienced before?
I don't think this is unprecedented. I think that this is one chapter in a long history of migration. I don't have the exact statistics, but millions of people have crossed our border, and they do so daily between Mexico and the United States, legally, without papers, or just going back and forth to visit their family. So we have very effective public health mechanisms in place to track and control diseases that might happen.
Let's say these children from Central America reach their destination. Come the next academic year, they'll likely be enrolled in school. Any obligation on the state or federal level to be sure children are ready to go with vaccines, et cetera?
Every state allows medical exemptions, so if for some reason you are allergic or aren't able to have a vaccine, then you don't have to have one. And some states take it a step further and they allow personal religious exemptions, and Arizona is one of those states. And what we see is that the population that is most likely to have exemptions from vaccinations means the children are unvaccinated. They're usually white and affluent, so it's a very different population than what we see coming across the border. In every state, they have these regulations, and they differ by state, but before you enroll in school, you have to show proof of your vaccination, so according to the regulations of that state. So there's really no risk that a child will enroll in school without maybe a migrant child would enroll without the proper vaccinations and health checkups. And county and state health departments provide those services for free.
Based on your research, your research in public health, your work along the border, anything that you think the viewers ought to know as the situation continues to evolve?
I think it's important to understand that the people who we're seeing are in incredibly vulnerable situations. And there are a lot of fear-based messages that aren't based on facts. It's not based on the evidence that we collect in public health or in other disciplines. And our duty as public health professionals is to promote healthy conditions and prevent the circumstances that cause disease. I would say that the issues that we see on the border is not the danger that migrants pose to the general population, but rather the hardships that the migrants are experiencing as they come into our communities. And our focus should be on providing essential services for those migrants, timely and appropriate health care, safe and comfortable and healthy living environments. All of those things will promote health, not only of the migrants, but of any agents or volunteers or the general population who comes into contact with them.
Okay, Katie, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Federal lawmakers may soon vote on a drought contingency plan. Last week, lawmakers reached a deal, but now it needs congressional approval. Farmers, like other water users, will have to adapt to a future with less water from the Colorado River. The University of Arizona Cooperative Extension has offices in every county of the state. Its function is to create partnerships between the university and communities. Jeff Silvertooth, the Associate Dean, recently visited our studios to explain how agriculture manages in the desert given the proposed drought contingency plan.
It will reduce agricultural water supplies, particularly in central Arizona, through the CAP, through the Central Arizona Project. And what that'll do is we'll cut down water, which way it's projected right now would reduce their water supply significantly, probably as much as they might have to fallow 40 to 60% of their land. Now, what does that mean to us? In Pinal County, that is the center for most of the dairy production in the state. And dairy production doesn't usually range more than about 500 miles from the dairies. So that's our epicenter for dairy production. So if we like milk and cheese and ice cream, some of those fine dairy products, that is going to affect that supply because we grow the crops like alfalfa and corn to feed the cattle to produce the milk. And then of course the cattle need water too. And so you look at Pinal County, they represent about 40% of the total dairy and cattle production here in Arizona. And if they cut that supply off, depends how the farmers manage it too. I mean, they're going to have to prioritize what crops they grow, what land they fallow, what they keep in place. But we'll probably see some changes in prices, I would project, that we might see from that. Eventually we would.
What's the time frame? You say eventually. Would we say in the next couple of years or months?
Yeah, that's a good question too. This is all predicated by the water supply on the Colorado River. And of course, here we are at the end of 17 years plus of a drought in the Southwest, and even a wet winter like this doesn't stop that process, doesn't alleviate the problem. And it's the water supply in the Colorado River that we depend on to a large extent. So you look at Arizona water supply, we say Colorado River supplies about, groundwater supplies about 40%, from our rivers, and about mainly the Colorado River main stem, and then about the other 20% coming from some other sources like the Gila River system, the Salt River, etc.
Hydrologists are closely monitoring reservoir levels. A critical water shortage is announced when the water level at Lake Mead reaches 1,075 feet above sea level, which could come as early as next year because reservoir levels are said to be at historic lows. In the event of cutbacks, agriculture takes the first reduction.
And what that means then is that because Arizona farmers particularly Central Arizona farmers, agreed in 2004 to take reduced costs for that water and repayment on their canals, take low priority water. Under the critical water shortage, they're the first to lose. Yeah. So they're going to lose a significant percent, enough to put about 40 to 60% of their land in fallow. So that's the crux of the issue right now.
Outside of farmers who rely on Central Arizona Project, I mean, there are other farmers and ranchers in Arizona who just rely on the climate, and the drought really hurts them. So how are they able to manage in midst of a drought?
We deal with them all the time in our education programs, learning how they're dealing with it, and try to do some research on our own to help with that, mitigation. But there are fundamental things we have to do, but the bottom line is we need water supply to grow these crops, to produce food, to feed people. And they have to respond to markets at the same time. So they're making adjustments. The cattle ranchers, for example, reduce herd numbers. And it gets really bad, they'll sell off, liquidate part of the herd, and then resupply. But that's not an easy task, but that's what they about have to do. In a farming situation, we're looking at it all the time, improve efficiencies of irrigation, change the techniques or the patterns with cropping systems, and we're looking at new irrigation systems. And then, of course, there's always takes money, capital to make that happen. But people are working on it all the time. And we've seen it. I've been here in this state now for 32 years, and almost 33 years if you count seasons, working in agriculture. And there's been tremendous steps forward, advances in increasing efficiencies in irrigation and in agricultural systems, much more so than the average public, I think, understands. There's perceptions out there, but the facts are the increases in irrigation efficiency have improved. The stick's been in folks' back because of water supply to do that.
Are we having the right conversations about sustainability when we talk about the future?
Well, we have a lot of conversations about sustainability, and that's kind of a loaded term in a way, because you ask 10 people what is sustainability and you get 10 different definitions. But if we look at long-term, the capacity for us to maintain agricultural systems in Arizona to help sustain a population in the desert. And right now we have, 7.2 million people living in Arizona on limited resources. To me, sustainability means how do we sustain a population of this size, urban-based primarily. How do we sustain a population like that in this kind of environment over the long term for our children and grandchildren and the unborn generations yet to come? That, to me, is sustainability. So I'll answer your question in that context.
Okay. We
are having good conversations about that, but the reality is our society is driven this way. We have a tendency to be short-sighted and deal with things as they become a crisis. And I think of that, Lorraine, when I look back and think, we're standing on the shoulders of our forefathers. They did a good job of looking ahead. The dams and reservoirs that were built, which are somewhat controversial in some sectors, but they're giving us these water supplies. Because the systems, the infrastructure we live on, that forethought was developed by our predecessors even 100 years ago. So we're living on their dreams, their visions that they put in place in the 20th century. My question I ask, I guess it's the same as yours to some extent, are we thinking ahead in terms of how we manage our infrastructure? We're investing in the infrastructure and the capacities to sustain a population here 100 years from now. Yeah. I think that's a critical question, and I think we are, but perhaps I question sometimes. I'm concerned, are we doing it fast enough and well enough? But I know the sectors I work in, people are aware of that and they're working on it, but they have to do it within practical constraints.
Okay, Dr. Silvertooth, thank you.
My pleasure, thank you.
Our guests today have been Em and Topco. Em and Topco, thanks so much for being here.
Generation Z refers to anyone born after 1997. As this generation grows up, many are starting to take stock of the world around them. We have the story of two such teens in Tucson with an interest in economics and their own podcast that explores how related issues impact Arizonans. We recently got a look behind the scenes at how they produce an episode. Downtown Tucson's Z Mansion isn't like any classroom in the city. But nonetheless, University High School students Grace Probsting and Rose Long are here to learn.
Quickly introduce you all, have you guys introduce yourselves.
Prepared with plenty of questions.
Okay, welcome back to the Gosh Darn podcast.
They plan to share what they find out with the rest of the world through their podcast called Gosh Darn Podcast.
We're not NPR in the sense that we try to craft a certain story, but we do hope that it can help teach people about things they may not be familiar with otherwise.
People have things to say, so why not hear them?
I think are the most important steps.
Today, the teens are tackling the issue of homelessness in Tucson with Tom and Emmeline Hill, leaders of the Workship Project, which feeds up to 300 homeless men and women every Sunday at the mansion. For about an hour, they discuss factors that often send people out into the streets.
What do you think prevents so many people from actually humanizing homeless people?
And how the city and organizations like theirs are responding.
So why do you think the other council people haven't been working for the homeless to the same degree?
The homeless are a group that have no power of any.
I think they have not only a wonderful podcast, but a really great approach to it. Ta-da!
The next step
Let me make sure this is saved.
is turning today's interview into an episode.
We find if there's any large gaps, as we have our little music intro section and conclusion section, we add that on.
Welcome to the Gosh Darn Podcast. My name is Rose Long.
And I'm Grace Probsting.
And we're two high school students interested in...
A few weeks later, we see that process firsthand at University High.
I'm just gonna don't want too little pause though.
It was here in their varsity economics club that Rose, Grace, and two other students came up with the idea for Gosh Darn Podcast, with encouragement from their teacher, Jim Lurch.
The end goal is just to get the kids interested in applying technology in new ways, to try and get them thinking about economics in ways that they hadn't thought about it before, and partly just to get the word out about what we're doing at University High.
Without collecting a single...
After spending more than a year developing the podcast, they found their groove leading up to last November's midterm election. Grace, still young to vote, and Rose, barely old enough to cast a ballot, set out to get candidates' views on education in the wake of last spring's Red for Ed movement.
Essentially what we did is we just researched to find as many different people as we could, so people running for state house, state senate, superintendent of public instruction, people running for local school boards, and just sent a bunch of mass emails, identical emails saying, would you like to talk to us about your views on public education? And very luckily for us, a lot of people said yes.
Passing the laws.
Among those who said yes, now State Superintendent Kathy Hoffman,
And so it would be my role to be advocating and setting the priorities for them.
State Representative Randall Freese,
because we aren't adequately addressing a solution.
and Marana Unified School Board member Tom Carlson.
Kids who fall into that category tend not to continue on with their education.
On average, each episode is about half an hour long and features the entire interview. Rose and Grace make it a point to let their guests speak freely.
Yeah, I think that if I was taking more of a line where I framed the issue and I gave them harder questions, it would have been different, but we kind of just gave them questions and let them talk and let them have their own ideas come out.
In addition to the election and homelessness, the pair have also produced episodes about immigration. They say these issues can all trace back to the economy.
Well, not all of our questions are directly related to economics. I think at the end of the day, the root of the topics that we're trying to explore are very much focused in economic issues.
Absolutely. Economics is just people making choices. If listeners just are informed about what's happening, hopefully they can make a difference. Hopefully they can make a change. Hopefully they can just know better what they want out of this life.
You guys have been out, you know what it's like.
The teens aren't trying to target a specific audience, and online streaming numbers of the show are modest, with a few dozen listeners tuning in. But they see themselves setting a powerful example for their peers.
We have no credentials. We just emailed a bunch of politicians, and we thought that none of them were going to get back to us, but they were surprisingly willing to talk to just average teenage students. So if you're a young person and you want to get involved, don't be afraid to get started, because adults are surprisingly willing to help you out.
To listen to the Gosh Darn Podcast, visit our website, azpm.org/Arizona360. Podcasts and TV are just a few ways people can get their news these days, and in this increasingly divisive political climate, you often hear the term fake news being used. A long-standing Gallup poll that surveys Americans' confidence in U.S. institutions found that out of 15 groups, trust in television news ranks second to last, just above Congress. Newspapers were only 2 places ahead. That leads to our next discussion about how journalists should respond and adapt to heightened skepticism. For more, we turn to Dylan Smith, editor and publisher of the Tucson Sentinel, and Susan Swanberg, a former attorney and assistant professor at the University of Arizona School of Journalism. Susan, I want to start with you. The industry's changing. How should journalists adapt? I mean, you are a professor, so you probably have these conversations regularly with your students.
That's true, and it can be very difficult to adapt. And when you have students who are excited about the profession, you don't want to dampen that enthusiasm. On the other hand, you want them to have a realistic view of what they're going to be facing. So I always discuss ethics and that it's better to be accurate and quick. You need to balance that so you don't make mistakes. I also try to make my classroom a place where they can own up to mistakes so that they learn that it's better to go talk to someone and explain, ooh, I think I made a mistake, and then fix it if it's fixable.
Dylan, you can keep the foundations of journalism in place, but nonetheless, the media are scrutinized.
Yeah, I think there are some time-honored principles of journalism that we are always going to keep in mind. You have them right there in front of you. The Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics that all of us, most of us, keep very much in the forefront of our minds. And so many changes going on outside of that, you know, in technology and the business itself, but trying to maintain that, to remember what our job is, to seek the truth and tell people about it, needs to still be the most important thing.
Trust and respect are things that we need to maintain, but is the public, though many of us are shooting for that every instance of our work, but does the public view that the same?
I think it's a little touchy right now, but I think one way we can deal with that is to emphasize the fact that we have a job to do, we have a role to play in a democracy, and also to be role models for transparency. There are a lot of issues related to transparency involving records and hearings, and right now the Mueller Mueller file and the report is a controversy. But we need to be transparent. We need to teach our students that transparency is very important. It's one of the most important things, as is independence. We need to be careful with our social media presence, make sure that we don't appear to have biases, and I think that can go a long way to maybe reinstill some confidence in journalism. But it's going to take a long time. A lot of damage has been done, and I don't think we can reverse it overnight. What would you say?
I think there is a lot of confusion in the minds of readers, viewers, that just the general public about the difference between journalism overall and reporting. Journalism legitimately includes commentary. Hopefully it's founded commentary that puts things into context and analyzes things and doesn't try to just back up a set of alternative facts that support some point of view that aren't really facts at all. And we see, you know, way too much of that and way too much just, hot air being spewed on cable news. And a lot of people in the public think of that as what journalism is. You know, journalism is digging into things, finding out the things that politicians and bureaucrats and corporations and activist groups don't really want you to know, and letting people know about them and explaining them. That, you know, I think reporting is what we need to try and get across, is what people actually need. They need good, solid information.
Susan, you mentioned a lot of damage has already been done. Who's done the damage?
I think it's culture-wide. I think there's been so much mistrust. I think in government there are so many controversies where the media, journalism, journalists, reporters are trying to report accurately, try to uncover those truths, but there's so much pushback. There's so much of a desire to hide things, and there's loss of understanding of the role of journalism that Dylan was just speaking about. So that's where I think a lot of the damage has been done. And Dylan is right that they don't understand that there is a place for opinion, evidence-based opinion, which is what I teach my students. If you do write opinion pieces, they have to be evidence-based. So I think it's culture-wide where the damage is coming from. And there is some crosstalk back and forth that aggravates it at times.
You've both mentioned social media, and oftentimes you will see a journalist retweet something from someone or opine on something that maybe can color their reputation. Are the viewers, the readers, subscribers sitting back and forming an opinion about that person's bias?
Maybe a little bit, and I don't think it's a necessity for reporters to pretend that they have no opinions about things. You know, what Jay Rosen at NYU calls the view from nowhere. You know, balancing on a knife's edge of not favoring any side doesn't serve the truth. It's our job to dig into things and point out what's true and what is false, and sometimes even what is a lie. That sort of independence from the process, not trying to favor one side or another, but just favoring the truth, is something that I think journalists need to have opinions about.
What is your message to the viewers, the readers who are sitting at home and watching this and thinking, can I trust that person? What do I need to know about that person? I mean, this is a thankless job. Many journalists, we do not make a lot of money. But you're highlighted and people put a spotlight on you because they think that they know you and your type of work. So what's the message to those folks?
Turn off cable TV news, quite simply. You know, there's still some good reporters who work for the networks, but so much of that is just people babbling hot air and repeating the talking points that they were faxed that morning. Some of those people still get faxes, I think. That's how they get their stuff. And it's just really a performative exercise that does not inform anybody. You know, go find people who are dedicated to actually bringing you the truth rather than delivering the political message of the day.
Susan?
Well, one thing that I would suggest people do is get their information from more than one source. Look at different perspectives. Get your information from a broad variety of places, and then you're more likely to get something that's balanced. And Dylan is very right, though, that balance in journalism, for example, as I tell my students, you're not going to give a lot of attention to someone who believes the earth is flat when you're writing a story about the earth. So sometimes balance does not help you reach the truth. You need to be balanced if there are evidence-based opinions on both or many sides, but you also have to be careful not to overemphasize something that is not factual.
And don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone if what you're hearing and reading is not what you want to hear and see.
That's true, and bells should go off if you're a careful reader. If there's something that maybe doesn't have a basis in reality.
That's all for now. Thanks for joining us. To share your feedback, visit us on social media and let us know what you think. We'll see you next week.